Captain Marnix Harlow hated mornings in space, not because they were inherently terrible, but because they required him to be conscious. Consciousness inevitably meant dealing with the crew of the starship Indomitable, a ragtag bunch that even a black hole might think twice about swallowing. The Indomitable wasn't just any ship. It was a collector's item, where collector is code for junk. Her hull was more patchwork than solid, her engines coughed like a smoker's lungs, and her control panel was held together with, no joke, duct tape. Yet here she was, defying the universe's slow, inevitable slide into heat death by simply refusing to shut up and die. "Captain," squawked a voice over the intercom. It was Vex, the ship's comms officer, who communicated primarily in sarcasm and static. "We've arrived at the starship graveyard. Lucky us." "The only graveyard where you get to be buried alive," Marnix muttered, dragging himself out of his quarters. He pulled on his jacket, still stained from last night's encounter with a particularly uncooperative bottle of moonshine, and made his way to the bridge. The view outside was as comforting as a funeral. Hulking wrecks of ships orbiting a black hole, spinning in slow, ghostly dance steps choreographed by gravity's cruel hand. This was the infamous setting for the Galactic Sports Tournament, where, much like the universe, only the stubborn survived. "Beautiful, isn't it?" remarked Rena, the ship's pilot, with an irony as thick as the black hole's event horizon. Her hands danced across the controls with a dexterity that suggested she was either very skilled or very reckless. With Rena, it was usually both. "Stunning," Marnix replied dryly, "if you have a thing for existential dread." "Oh, who doesn't these days?" Rena shot back with a grin that might have been charming if it weren't for the fact that her smiles usually preceded some kind of catastrophe. Marnix settled into the captain's chair, which creaked ominously under his weight. "What have we got? Any threats? Lurking assassins? Morally dubious alliances? Nothing but a lot of dead metal, Cap," Vex replied, tapping away at his console. "Though I did pick up some chatter about a team of sentient cockroaches trying to qualify for the finals." "Ah, the underdogs," Marnix said, eyebrows raising. "I admire their pluck. I bet they get better ratings than us," Rena remarked. "Probably better odds, too," Vex added. "We should put in a bet, might get enough to repair the hull." "I'd rather put my money on us," chimed in Jax, their engineer, sauntering onto the bridge with the swagger of someone who'd won a poker game with a loaded deck. "Of course, I'd rather use someone else's money, but you know." "Optimism, Jax," Marnix feigned surprise. "I hardly recognize you." "Desperation, Cap." "Optimism's bastard cousin," Jax corrected, plopping down next to Rena and starting a game of space solitaire on the console. "Speaking of desperation," Rena said, steering their lumbering craft into a stable orbit, "why are we here again?" "Besides adding to the ambience of this cosmic graveyard, the Galactic Sports Tournament," Marnix said with a touch of mock reverence, "where the universe has best come to prove that even at the end of all things we're still too stubborn to roll over and die. And we're what, the comic relief," Rena quipped. "We're the wild card," Marnix corrected. "The underdogs, the long shots, the cannon fodder," Vex finished for him. Marnix shrugged. Details. The crew settled into a tense silence, each lost in their own thoughts, mostly calculations of survival odds, which were about as promising as a snowflake's chance in the sun. The silence was broken by the ship's AI unit, a relic from an age where artificial intelligence was more artificial than intelligent. "Captain, shall I prepare for our glorious entrance into the tournament?" it asked with a cheerfulness that clashed wildly with the existential bleakness of the surroundings. "Glorious entrance," Marnix snorted. "Let's aim for avoiding immediate obliteration." "Setting course for glorious entrance," the AI chirped, entirely missing the point. "I swear that thing's got a death wish," Jax muttered. "In case anyone's forgotten," Marnix said, leaning forward with a grin that would have seemed more at home on a pirate than a captain, "we're here because humanity refuses to go quietly into that good night. We're here because we're too dumb to quit. And too broke," Vex added helpfully. "Right," Marnix nodded. We win this, and we might just be able to afford enough fuel to get out of this hellhole. If we lose, Rena asked, not taking her eyes off the slowly rotating wrecks outside. Then we're just another piece of floating garbage, Marnix replied. But at least we'll have a nice view. Assuming you like staring into an abyss that's actively trying to eat you, Rena quipped. Marnix chuckled. Hey, we all gotta have hobbies. The bridge was quiet again except for the low hum of machinery and the distant, ominous pull of the black hole, a reminder that even in a universe on the brink of heat death, nature never ceased being a relentless bastard. So what's the plan, Cap? Jax finally asked, breaking the tension. Simple, Marnix said. We win. Oh, that's all, Vex scoffed. And here I thought it'd be difficult, Marnix grinned. Who said it wouldn't be? But if it was easy, everyone would do it. The crew exchanged looks, their cynicism momentarily replaced with something that might have been hope if you squinted hard enough. And though they stood on the brink of oblivion, surrounded by the failures of greater vessels and grander dreams, they knew one thing: they were human. Stubborn, irreverent, and perhaps just a little bit insane. And that in a universe of darkness might just be enough. Brace yourselves, Marnix said, as the ship adjusted its course toward the tournament grounds. Let's show them what humanity's really made of. As the Indomitable steered into the heart of the graveyard, a cacophony of alarms screamed to life, because, of course, nothing could ever be simple. Ah, there it is, Rena said, unfazed by the flashing red lights. I was wondering when things would get interesting. Marnix just smiled, his eyes gleaming with a wild, reckless edge. Let's give them a show they'll never forget. And so, with gallows humor and stubborn defiance, Captain Marnix Harlow and his motley crew plunged into the unknown, determined to carve their own path through the dying cosmos. It wasn't just about winning the tournament. It was about proving that even at the end of all things, humanity would not go quietly. They'd go kicking and screaming, preferably with a middle finger raised to the universe. As they raced toward the start of the tournament, systems failing and alarms blaring, Marnix couldn't help but laugh. It was a mad, reckless sound, perfectly at home amidst the chaos. And as the Indomitable hurtled forward, there was only one certainty. In a universe that seemed hell-bent on ending, the human spirit remained unbreakable, untamed, and absolutely, gloriously irreverent. The Indomitable rattled through space like a tin can in a tumbled dryer, systems protesting with every course correction. The tournament grounds loomed ahead, a sprawling mess of derelict ships clinging desperately to the event horizon like moths to a flame. Welcome to the Galactic Sports Tournament, announced a holographic announcer projected before them. It had the charisma of a used car salesman and the sincerity to match. Where champions are made and the rest, well, they're recycled, reassuring, Rena muttered, her fingers flitting across the controls with the precision of a concert pianist or a cat burglar. Just what we need, Vex added, voice crackling with more static than usual. A pep talk from a glorified light bulb. Marnix leaned back in his chair, which threatened to collapse like a flan in a cupboard. Who's our competition? Please say it's those cockroaches. I love an underdog story. Not quite, Vex replied, tapping the console with a rhythmic irritation that suggested it was either this or strangling it. We've got the Valgothians in the lineup, the Valgothians. Great, Marnix sighed. The universe's favorite overachievers. Because what this tournament really needs is their smug superiority. Skrizax leading them, Jax said with the kind of grim acknowledgement usually reserved for bowel surgery. Apparently, they've been the favorites for the last 10 years. He's the one with the mandibles that could clip a starship in half, right? Rena asked. Or a twig, Vex corrected. But let's not split hairs, or twigs. Marnix tightened his grip on the armrests. I suppose they'll have the usual high-tech bells and whistles. Shields, cloaking devices, the works. Yup, Vex confirmed. Think of them as a Swiss Army knife. We're more of a rusty spoon. Hey, a spoon can still gouge out an eye, Marnix offered, never one to let a glimmer of optimism go unmocked. Only if you get really, really close, Rena said. Well, I guess we'll have to get close then, Marnix said, his grin dangerously verging on hopeful. "What's the first challenge?" "Zero-gravity race through the derelicts," Vex replied, pulling up a holographic map of the course. It resembled the scribbles of a hyperactive child, all sharp turns and dead ends. "Try not to get splattered against a bulkhead. If it's a race through junk," Jax said, deadpan, "we might actually have the home field advantage." "Right," Marnix nodded, clapping his hands together with faux enthusiasm. Everyone loves a good underdog story, or a tragic cautionary tale. "Let's make sure it's the former." The crew set to work, each member focusing on their tasks with the kind of grim determination that suggested they were either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. As they approached the starting line, a massive Valgothian ship pulled up alongside them, sleek and deadly as a well-honed blade. Skrizak appeared on the comm screen, all rippling exoskeleton and eyes like black holes. "Humans," he rumbled, the word dripping with disdain. "I'm surprised to see your kind here. Most are too busy dying out, aren't they?" "Nice to see you too, Skrizak," Marnix replied with a smile that could cut glass. "We thought we'd join in before the universe kicked the bucket." "What with the heat, death, and all?" Skrizak's mandibles clicked together in what might have been amusement. Brave words for a species relying on duct tape and stubbornness. "Hey, never underestimate the power of duct tape," Jax chimed in. "It's holding this conversation together." "I look forward to seeing you recycled," Skrizak said, cutting the feed with the finality of a guillotine. Rena let out a low whistle. "Charming fellow." "I'm just brimming with good vibes over here." "Enough banter," Marnix said, rolling his shoulders. "Let's focus on the race. Remember, it's not the size of the ship, it's the whatever, just don't hit anything." They took their positions, engines sputtering into life with a cough that suggested someone had fed them a diet of gravel and old socks. The countdown began, and Marnix felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. It was the kind of thrill that made you feel alive, or at least alive adjacent. 3, 2, 1, go. The race erupted into chaos as ships shot forward, weaving through the carcasses of forgotten vessels. Marnix gritted his teeth, the space around them a kaleidoscope of spinning debris and shipwrecks. "Watch that drift," Rena shouted, her voice barely audible over the clamor of alarms. "We've got a Valgothian on our tail." "Of course we do," Marnix muttered, eyes flitting between the course and the radar. "Can't make it too easy, right?" He wrenched the controls, dodging a particularly stubborn chunk of metal that seemed hell-bent on becoming a permanent fixture of their hull. Every move was a gamble, the line between victory and disaster as thin as Rena's patience when sober. "Left," Vex yelled, eyes glued to the sensors. "No, right." "Damn it, straight ahead, pick one," Marnix barked, narrowly avoiding a collision with a derelict cruiser. "I can't do all three." The Valgothians were closing in, their ship's outline visible in the rear view screen. They moved with the precision of a scalpel, a deadly contrast to the Indomitable's enthusiastic flailing. "Skrizak's gaining," Rena shouted. Marnix pushed the engines harder, the ship shuddering like a cat being dragged through a rainstorm. "Jax, I need more speed now." "I'm giving her all she's got, Cap," Jax shouted back. "But the old girl's not responding well to getting kicked in the afterburner." "Then kick harder," Marnix snapped, ignoring the groan of metal under stress. "We've got a race to win, or at least not lose horribly." The Indomitable lurched forward, a burst of speed carrying them through a narrow gap in the wreckage. Behind them, the Valgothians maneuvered with infuriating grace, closing the distance with every second. "Time for a little surprise," Rena said, fingers dancing over the controls. "Hang on." Without warning, the Indomitable veered sharply to the right, heading straight for a cluster of particularly dense debris. Marnix's heart leapt into his throat. "Are you trying to kill us?" Vex shouted, "Trust me." Rena yelled back, eyes alight with reckless determination. Marnix gripped the armrests, preparing for impact. Instead, the Indomitable slipped through a small opening, the Valgothians not far behind. "Now," Rena shouted, hitting a switch. As the Indomitable cleared the gap, Rena triggered the ship's rear thrusters, sending a cloud of debris cascading into the path of their pursuers. The Valgothians swerved, too late to avoid being caught in the storm of metal. "Eat space dust," Rena crowed, watching the Valgothian ship falter. Marnix let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Nice work. Remind me to never doubt you again." "I'll add it to your tab," Rena said, her grin as wide as the black hole's event horizon. Skrizak's ship fell back, giving the Indomitable the precious seconds they needed to pull ahead. The finish line loomed ahead, a beacon of relief amidst the chaos. "We might actually make it," Jax breathed, disbelief evident in his voice. "Keep it steady," Marnix urged, eyes fixed on the prize. "We're not out of the woods yet." The Indomitable surged forward, engines screaming in protest but holding together through sheer force of will and a lot of duct tape. As they crossed the finish line, a cheer went up from the crew. "We did it," Vex exclaimed, slapping the console with glee. "We actually did it for now," Marnix cautioned, though he allowed himself a moment of triumph. Against the odds, they'd survived the first challenge. "Not bad for a bunch of stubborn primates," Rena said, her tone one of grudging admiration. "Never underestimate humanity's ability to make things difficult," Marnix replied, his gaze lingering on the view ahead, a tangled web of derelicts and stars. "Or our knack for survival." As the Indomitable made its way back to the staging area, Marnix allowed himself a rare moment of hope. They'd faced down the Valgothians and come out the other side with more than just their lives. "Next round's going to be tougher," Jax warned, breaking the contemplative silence. "Skrizak's not going to let that slide." "Good," Marnix said, his grin returning with a vengeance. "I was starting to get bored." And so, with the first victory under their belts, the crew of the Indomitable prepared for the challenges to come. In a universe that had long since stopped caring, they remained undaunted. For in a cosmos where only the stubborn survived, they were the most stubborn of them all. The universe had a way of making you feel small, particularly when you were navigating a labyrinthine shipwreck full of hostile environments in a backwater corner of the galaxy. Captain Marnix, Harlow stared at the tangled mess of twisted metal and fragmented dreams floating outside the viewport, and wondered why he hadn't taken up knitting or flower arranging instead. Anything but this. "All right, crew," Marnix said, his voice dripping with the kind of forced enthusiasm that made everyone brace for impact. "We've got another lovely challenge ahead, a delightful jaunt through a wreck that's more of a maze than your average tax code. A labyrinth," Vex quipped, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. "Didn't we just do the getting lost in space bit last week?" "No rest for the terminally foolish, Vex," Marnix retorted. "We're in a tournament, remember. We signed up for this, yeah. Well, I thought I was signing up for glory and riches," Vex said dryly. "Not an early retirement in a debris field." Rena, the Indomitable's ace pilot, tapped her fingers on the controls, her eyes scanning the wreckage. "What's the plan, Captain?" "Besides not dying, simple," Marnix replied. "We go in, we come out, and we hope we don't become one with the scrap." "Specifics?" Jax asked, his tone suggesting he wasn't entirely sold on the plan yet. "Jax, since when do specifics help us?" Marnix shot back. "We're going to improvise. That's what humans do best, make stuff up as we go along and hope for the best. Improvising is just Latin for we're screwed," Vex muttered. "Let's keep our focus, shall we?" Rena interjected, adjusting the ship's trajectory to line up with the entry point of the wreck. "Skrizak's lot is probably already in there, making us look bad. Let them," Marnix said with a shrug. "We might be a rusty spoon, but we're a damn good rusty spoon." The Indomitable slipped into the maze of derelict ships, the shadows of hulking wrecks looming on all sides like silent, judgmental gods. Marnix couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, though he chalked it up to paranoia, or maybe just common sense. "Keep your eyes peeled," he warned. "If this place doesn't get us, Skrizak will." The ship twisted and turned through the labyrinth, each passage more claustrophobic than the last. Vex kept a running commentary on the likelihood of their imminent demise, mostly for his own amusement. "Left," Marnix ordered, and Rena obliged, guiding the ship with the precision of a concert pianist on a caffeine high. "Right," Jax pointed out, squinting at the sensors. "There's a pocket of breathable atmosphere in that section. Could be useful if we need to, breathe or explode," Vex added unhelpfully. "Air's tricky that way," Rena snorted. "Thanks for the reassurance. Next time we're doing a tour of the galaxy's worst places to die, remind me to leave you behind." Despite the banter, they made progress, weaving through the labyrinth with a mix of skill and blind luck. Of course, luck had a way of running out, and they soon found themselves facing a dead end, a bulkhead sealing off their path with a smug finality. "So much for seamless navigation," Marnix grumbled. "Ideas, anyone, why not just blow it up?" Rena suggested, her tone light but serious. "Might solve a few problems and create a dozen new ones," Jax pointed out. "We don't know what's on the other side." "Could be a fuel tank or a Valgothian welcoming committee," Vex said, "complete with heavy artillery and a buffet of sarcasm. Let's not risk it," Marnix decided. "Backtrack a bit, see if there's a way around." As they reversed course, the murmur of calm static caught their attention. Skrizak's voice crackled through, as smug as ever. "Lost, are we?" Skrizak taunted, his tone a study in condescension. "Perhaps you require assistance from a superior species. Thanks, but no thanks," Marnix replied with a grin. "We're just enjoying the scenic route." "By all means," Skrizak chuckled. "Take your time. We'll be waiting at the finish line." The comm went dead, leaving the crew in irritated silence. Rena punched the console, her patience wearing thin. "I hate that guy. Join the club," Marnix said. "But we're not out of this yet. Let's find another way." They maneuvered back through the maze, Rena's hands a blur on the controls. The ship groaned in protest as they pushed through a narrow gap, scraping metal and rattling their bones. Marnix didn't have time for second thoughts. He was too busy trying to stay alive. "Got something?" Jax barked, tapping his screen. "Looks like an access tunnel. Might lead us closer to the exit." "Then let's take it," Marnix ordered. "Hang on, everyone." The indomitable dove into the tunnel, the walls a blur of rust and decay. Rena's grip was steady, her concentration absolute. "Hope this doesn't end in another dead end," Vex muttered, scanning for any sign of trouble. "I'm getting tired of those." "Think positive," Jax said with an eye roll. "Could be worse." "How?" Vex challenged. "We could be dead, or worse," Jax replied. "We could be listening to Skrizak gloat." They emerged from the tunnel into a cavernous chamber, the remains of long-forgotten ships scattered like discarded toys. Marnix squinted, searching for their path, when the telltale flicker of a cloaked ship caught his eye. "Valgothians," he warned, the word a curse on his lips. "Looks like they've got the same idea." "Great," Rena sighed. "Just what we need. A race to the exit. Let's not make it easy for them," Marnix said, his mind racing. "Think we can use the debris to our advantage?" "Absolutely," Rena said, determination in her voice. "But it's going to be tight, isn't it always?" Vex replied, his tone resigned but ready. They shot forward, the indomitable ducking and weaving through the wreckage like a drunk trying to navigate a minefield. Behind them the Valgothians followed, their cloaked ship a shadow among shadows. Time for some creative flying, Marnix decided, his fingers dancing over the controls. "Keep them guessing." Rena nodded, her focus unbreakable. The ship twisted through narrow gaps, skimming the edges of twisted metal with millimeter precision. "Remind me to buy you a drink if we survive this," Vex said, holding on for dear life. "I'll hold you to it," Rena replied with a grin, shifting course abruptly to avoid a collision. The Valgothians were relentless, but even their high-tech gadgets couldn't match the unpredictability of human ingenuity. Marnix spotted a particularly unstable section of the wreck ahead, a tangled mess of support beams and drifting panels. "Rena, head for that," he instructed, pointing it out. "We can use it to slow them down." "On it," she replied, adjusting their trajectory. As they neared the debris, Rena activated the ship's maneuvering thrusters, sending a cascade of metal into their wake. A makeshift barrier formed, forcing the Valgothians to swerve and slow. "Good one," Jax said, impressed. "That should give us some breathing room." "Won't last long," Marnix cautioned. "Let's not waste the opportunity." They pushed on, the exit finally looming in sight. The Valgothians lurked close behind, their presence a constant reminder that this was far from over. "Almost there," Rena said, her voice steady despite the tension. Marnix nodded, his gaze fixed on the goal. "Let's bring it home, crew. We've come this far, no reason to quit now." The Indomitable surged forward, the engines screaming in protest one last time. Behind them, the Valgothians scrambled to catch up, their frustration palpable even through the void of space. "Skrizak's going to be pissed," Vex noted with a chuckle, watching their rivals fall behind. "Good," Marnix replied, a satisfied smirk on his lips. "Wouldn't want him to get too comfortable." They burst through the exit, emerging from the wreckage into open space. The relief was tangible, a collective exhale from the crew as they left the labyrinth and their pursuers behind. "Nice work, everyone," Marnix said, his voice a mix of pride and exhaustion. "We're still in this. For now," Jax reminded, always the realist. "But it's only going to get harder," Marnix nodded, accepting the truth of it. "Then we'll just have to get better." As the Indomitable cruised back towards the safety of the tournament grounds, the crew took a moment to savor their small victory. The odds were still stacked against them, but they'd proven something today, that even a rusty spoon could hold its own against a Swiss Army knife. And somewhere out there, Skrizak was undoubtedly fuming, plotting his next move. But for the humans aboard the Indomitable, that was a problem for tomorrow. Today, they'd survived. And in a universe with little room for sentiment, that was enough. For now. As the Indomitable glided through the vast emptiness of space, Marnix Harlow couldn't help but feel like an ant trying to navigate a buffet table. The ship rattled its protest, a familiar chorus by now, every system held together by little more than spit and stubbornness. The crew knew they were one malfunction away from becoming a permanent part of the starship graveyard. Rena's hands danced over the controls, more out of habit than necessity at this point. "You know, if this were easy, we'd probably be dead already." "Sure, easy is overrated," Vex quipped, leaning back with his trademark smirk. "But I'd settle for slightly less lethal." Marnix chuckled despite himself. "Slightly less lethal is for optimists. We don't have the luxury." The navigation system beeped angrily, a little like an old man woken from a nap. Marnix frowned, poking at it with as much authority as one could muster when the equipment clearly didn't give a damn. "What's it saying now?" Jax asked, sounding more bored than worried. That was his thing, skepticism wrapped in ennui. "Something about recalibrating," Marnix muttered. "In the way a cat recalibrates its claws on your best jacket." The lights flickered, and for a moment the ship felt like it was holding its breath. Then everything went dark. Not pitch-black space dark, but close enough that Marnix felt a shiver run down his spine. "Well, that's new," Vex muttered from his corner, the glow of his datapad casting an eerie light on his face. "Anybody got a flashlight?" Rena's voice cut through the gloom, sharp and steady. "This is either really bad or really, really bad." "Or, Jax chimed in, "it's the universe's idea of a practical joke. Surprise, no lights for you." "Ha ha," Marnix responded dryly. "Let's hope it's the kind that doesn't end with us as space debris." The lights flickered back on, dimmer than before, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. The navigation system, however, remained stubbornly dead. Marnix tapped a few buttons, but the screen only blinked back at him with a sort of electronic irritation. "We've lost the nav system," Rena reported, unnecessarily but with the kind of resigned tone that said she knew exactly how much trouble they were in. "Blind and stupid, hell of a combo." Marnix scratched his chin, trying to summon a plan B. "Can we jury-rig something?" Vex rolled his eyes, ever the purveyor of realism. "With what? Spit and prayer," Jax snorted. "Hey, that's our ship's motto." "All right, enough doom and gloom," Marnix said, cutting through the sarcasm. "We need a way out." "Ideas," Rena was the first to respond. "We could try to manually track our position using the stars." Old school," Vex feigned horror. "Why not just ask the universe to put up a neon sign? This way, idiots." "Because, Vex, the universe is too busy laughing its ass off at us," Marnix replied, shaking his head. "But it's the best idea we've got. Let's try it." While Rena began her celestial calculations, Marnix couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on them. Not just the usual paranoia induced by the wreckage surrounding them, but something more intentional. Meanwhile, in the shadow of a derelict star cruiser, Skrizak convened with a ragtag assembly of alien captains. If there was one thing Skrizak excelled at, it was orchestrating alliances. His mandibles clicked with satisfaction as he surveyed his audience, a motley crew of different species, each with a reason to hate the humans. "Gentle beings," Skrizak began, his voice smooth as a salesman's handshake. "We find ourselves at a crossroads, more like a dead end," grumbled a Teshan captain, his scales glinting under the low light. "Call it what you will," Skrizak continued, undeterred. "But let's not pretend we don't share a common enemy." "There's only one enemy," a bulbous-headed Drog interjected, his voice like gravel. "Winning." "Ah, but winning is much easier without unexpected variables, like our human friends," Skrizak suggested, his tone the verbal equivalent of a wink. The room murmured its agreement, a symphony of discontentment and grudging acknowledgement. Skrizak knew the look of hungry predators when he saw it. The humans, with their knack for survival against odds, were like a thorn in the galaxy's collective side. "An alliance, then," Skrizak proposed, his mandibles clicking with each syllable, "to ensure the tournament's rightful outcome." Back on the Indomitable, things were going about as well as could be expected when your navigation was dead and your enemies were plotting. Rena had managed to piece together a rough star map, jury-rigged with bits of paper and string. It was about as accurate as a drunk's attempt at karaoke, but it was the best they had. "Well, isn't this just dandy?" Vex remarked, looking over Rena's handiwork. "Guess we're playing connect the dots with our lives. Better than playing guess which explosive ends it all," Rena shot back, her patience worn thin. Marnix tried to focus, feeling the pressure of command pressing down like an unwelcome blanket. "We move forward, slow and steady. Our best bet is to stick with what we know, which is ironically nothing." Jax, ever the optimist, sighed. "What's the worst that can happen? The universe could prove it hates us," Vex replied with a sardonic grin. Again, they pushed on, inching forward through the labyrinth with all the grace of a sleep-deprived elephant. Every creak and groan of the ship made Marnix's heart skip a beat, each one a reminder of just how temporary their lease on life was. As they navigated between looming wrecks, the comms crackled to life, and for a moment, Marnix dared to hope for a friendly voice. Instead, Skrizak's smug tone slithered into the cockpit. "Struggling humans. Perhaps you need a map." Marnix rolled his eyes, unfazed by the taunt. "Didn't know you were part of the welcoming committee, Skrizak." "Oh, I assure you my welcome is anything but warm," Skrizak replied, his voice oozing menace. "The other teams agree." "You're quite the nuisance. Happy to keep you on your toes," Vex interjected, flashing a grin that no one could see but everyone could feel. "Enjoy your reprieve while you can," Skrizak warned. "It won't last." The comms went dead, leaving the crew in a silence that was both comforting and ominous. "Well, that's a nice way to start the day," Jax muttered. "Nothing like an existential threat to get the blood pumping." "Just another Tuesday," Marnix said, feigning nonchalance. "We've been through worse, have we?" Rena asked, not quite managing to mask her doubt. "Depends on your definition of worse," Vex chimed in, always ready with a quip. "I mean Skrizak's face is pretty high on my list." Laughter, strained but genuine, rippled through the cockpit. They needed it, a moment of levity in a sea of uncertainty. It was strange, Marnix thought, how humor had a way of making the impossible seem surmountable, even if it was just for a second. Pushing on, they navigated through the maze of derelicts, feeling the weight of Skrizak's threat like a shadow that wouldn't leave. Every twist and turn seemed to bring a new hazard, each more treacherous than the last. "Watch out for that." Jax's warning came just in time as Rena swerved, narrowly avoiding a jagged piece of debris that would have turned them into space confetti. Marnix clenched his fists, trying to keep his mounting frustration in check. "Rena, how's that star chart looking? Like a toddler's art project," she replied. "But it's getting us through. Guess we'll take what we can get," Marnix conceded. Keep at it. Meanwhile, Skrizek and his motley assembly of alien captains were planning their next move. The alliance was shaky at best, but desperation had a way of turning enemies into frenemies. "We should bait them," the Teshan captain suggested, his voice as oily as his skin. "Lure them into a trap, and how exactly do you propose we do that?" the Drog captain asked, unimpressed. "Leave that to me," Skrizek interrupted, exuding the confidence of someone convinced of his own genius. "They'll come to us." Back on the Indomitable, tensions were running high. The crew was focused, but the strain of their situation was starting to show. Every jolt, every scrape of metal against metal felt like another tick on the countdown to catastrophe. "Do you think Skrizek is serious?" Rena asked, breaking the tense silence. "About screwing us over?" Vex replied. "Oh, definitely. He's as serious as a heart attack. Good thing we're all on the same page," Jax added wryly. "I'd hate for him to feel left out. Look, we've got bigger problems than Skrizek's bruised ego," Marnix said, trying to keep them on task. "Focus on getting us through this mess." They pressed on, the ship groaning with every twist and turn. Marnix didn't know how much longer they could keep this up, but the one thing he was sure of was that they wouldn't go down without a fight. "You know," Vex mused, breaking the silence once more, "if we get out of this, I'm buying everyone a drink." "I'll hold you to that," Rena said, her focus unwavering as she expertly guided the ship through another narrow pass. Marnix chuckled, the sound more weary than amused. "I'll drink to that." With no choice but to keep going, they navigated through the dark, trusting Rena's instincts, and a bit of luck to see them through. Skrizek might have the galaxy's best tech, but they had something more valuable, a refusal to give up, no matter how grim the odds. And in a universe that seemed hell-bent on crushing that spirit, it was the best weapon they had. The Indomitable stumbled through the starship graveyard like a drunk trying to find his way home. The crew clung to their posts, each bump and jolt a reminder that any moment could be their last. Light years from any semblance of civilization, they'd long abandoned niceties and embraced the comforting cynicism of their predicament. "Rena, how's that map treating you?" Marnix asked, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrest of his chair. "Like a cat treats a bath," Rena replied, voice steady but tinged with frustration. "But it's holding for now." "Good enough for me," Marnix said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "We just need to hold it together until we find a way out of this mess. Is it just me, or does this place look like a scrapyard for everyone's worst ideas?" Vex quipped, leaning back in his chair, datapad casting a weak glow over his smirk. "If I find one more ship with a giant laser cannon attached to the engine, I'm going to lose it. Leave it to the universe to put all the tactical geniuses in one place," Jax added, shaking his head. "We're surrounded by the cream of the crap," Marnix chuckled dryly. "Sounds about right. We're the underdogs in a race no one bet on." Rena, ever the pragmatist, interrupted the banter. "I think we're coming up on something. The readings are faint, but there's energy output ahead. Think it's friendly?" Vex asked, hope barely veiling sarcasm. Jack snorted. "In this tournament? About as friendly as a rabid space weasel." "All right, let's not get too excited," Marnix warned. "Rena, keep us steady. Vex, keep an eye on those systems. If they start to go, I want to know before we're floating home." The ship pushed forward, steel grinding against the debris with all the subtlety of a bull in a china shop. Each clatter reverberated through Marnix's bones, a grim reminder of just how far they'd fallen from grace. Skrizek, meanwhile, was pulling strings like a puppeteer in a galaxy-wide comedy of errors. As his alliance of misfits and malcontents gathered, the alien captain plotted their next move with the enthusiasm of a child at a birthday party, if that party involved dismantling humans. "Everyone in position." Skrizek's voice crackled over the comms, dripping with conspiratorial glee. "We're ready," the Teshan captain replied, his voice a slick promise of betrayal. Just waiting for your signal, perfect, Skrizak said, mandibles clicking in anticipation. Let's welcome them to the tournament. Permanently. Back on the Indomitable, the crew's spirits were as low as their supplies, but they clung to their gallows humor like a lifeline. Anyone else feel like we're about to stumble into a trap? Jax mused, his skepticism palpable. Only if we're lucky, Vex shot back. At least then we'd know someone cared enough to set one. You know, I used to think the universe had it out for me personally, Marnix said, a grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. Turns out it's an equal opportunity jerk. Misery loves company, Rena added, not looking up from her controls. We're all invited to the party. The Indomitable crept forward, the faint energy readings growing stronger. Whatever lay ahead, it was something big, and in their universe big rarely meant good. Contact, Rena announced, her voice sharp with a mix of tension and determination. Looks like a supply depot. Old but maybe still functional. Think there's anything worth scavenging? Vex asked, a hopeful note in his voice. If not, we'll add it to the list of cosmic disappointments, Marnix replied. Rena, bring us in. Let's see if we can scrounge up something useful. As they approached the derelict depot, Marnix couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was the kind of sensation that crawled under your skin and made your brain itch. Paranoia was a luxury he couldn't afford, but experience had taught him that ignoring it could be fatal. Keep your eyes open, he warned. Something doesn't feel right. Is there a time things have felt right? Jax asked, sarcasm masking genuine concern. Point taken, Marnix conceded. Just more wrong than usual. The Indomitable docked with the depot, the connection as shaky as Marnix's confidence. They moved with the efficiency of a crew who'd done this too many times to count, each knowing their role in the dance of desperation. Vex, Jax, you're with me, Marnix said. Rena, keep the ship ready for a quick getaway. I don't trust this place. Trust is for the dead, Rena replied, her voice firm. I'll keep us ready. The trio moved through the depot, flashlights cutting through the dimness like weak promises. Abandoned crates and equipment littered the halls, remnants of forgotten endeavors. Feels like someone left in a hurry, Vex commented, kicking a crate open and peering inside. Hope they left us something good, or something that explodes, Jax said, eyeing the shadows with suspicion. Which, if you think about it, could be good depending on your perspective. Let's aim for not exploding, Marnix said, scanning the area. If you find anything useful, grab it. We won't get another chance. As they scavenged, a deep rumble echoed through the depot, the kind that makes your stomach drop and your mind race. The kind of sound that told you something was about to go very wrong. Time's up, Marnix said, urgency sharpening his voice. Move, they sprinted back to the Indomitable, each second stretching like eternity. As they clambered aboard, the ship groaned to life, engines reluctantly firing up. We've got company, Rena announced, her fingers dancing over the controls. Multiple ships closing in, Skrizak. Vex asked, strapping in. Who else? Marnix replied, teeth gritted in determination. He's like a bad rash. Hard to get rid of and impossible to ignore. The Indomitable jerked forward, engines protesting as Rena pushed them to their limits. Outside, the starship graveyard came alive with hostile ships, each one eager to claim their prize. Let's not give them the pleasure, Marnix said, eyes fixed on the chaos unfolding around them. Rena, get us out of here. You got it, Captain, she replied, her focus unwavering as she maneuvered with the grace of a practiced thief. The Indomitable weaved through the wreckage, each twist and turn a calculated gamble. Marnix felt every scrape and shudder, each one a reminder of how close they were to becoming part of the scenery. Think we'll make it? Jax asked, his tone casual despite the gravity of their situation. Hope so, Marnix replied. I've got plans for tomorrow and dying isn't one of them. The ship surged forward, Rena's deft touch keeping them just ahead of their pursuers. As they broke free of the depot, Marnix allowed himself a moment of relief, though he knew it was fleeting. Nice work, Rena, he said, gratitude evident in his voice. Don't thank me yet, she replied. We're not out of the woods. Let's just focus on staying one step ahead, Vex suggested, his datapad flashing erratic warnings. And maybe not dying. Solid plan, Marnix agreed, his eyes scanning the displays for any sign of a safe haven. We'll figure the rest out as we go. Behind them, the alien coalition lay in wait, determined to end the human streak of improbable survival. Skrizak watched from his own ship, satisfaction etched across his mandibles. Time to end this, he muttered, eyes narrowing as his fleet closed in. On the Indomitable, fatigue and adrenaline battled for control, each crew member aware that the next few moments could seal their fate. But as they faced the odds, their humor remained intact, a stubborn refusal to let fear rule them. Next time, let's sign up for something less life-threatening, Jack suggested. Like competitive knitting, noted Marnix replied, unable to suppress a grin. I hear the stakes are killer. With a final burst of speed, the Indomitable broke free of the graveyard's gravitational grip, leaving their pursuers in their wake. For now, they had escaped, but Marnix knew it was only a matter of time before Skrizak regrouped. All right, everyone, he said, settling back into his chair. Let's catch our breath and figure out our next move. Think we'll ever get a break? Vex asked, stretching his limbs with a wince. Not likely, Marnix replied. But as long as we're still breathing, we'll keep fighting. Here's to small victories, Rena said, her voice mingling exhaustion with resolve. The crew shared a moment of silence, the weight of their survival hanging heavy in the air. In a universe hell-bent on their destruction, they had proven once again that stubbornness and a refusal to bow to fate were their greatest assets. Next challenge? Vex asked, a sardonic gleam in his eyes. Survive the day, Marnix replied, a grin spreading across his face. And maybe find a way to stick it to Skrizak. With the odds stacked against them and an uncertain future ahead, the Indomitable flew on, propelled by the unyielding spirit of its crew and a determination to defy the cosmos. The Indomitable drifted through the starship graveyard like a ghost with a grudge, slipping past derelict ships that looked like they'd been designed by someone who'd lost a bet. Captain Marnix Harlow squinted at the display in front of him, the readouts flickering like a liar's smile. They'd put some distance between themselves and Skrizak's goons, but distance was as comforting as a wet blanket in space. Rena's voice cut through the cabin, a mix of irritation and exhaustion. We've got another blip on the scanners. Looks like another wreck. Great, Vex muttered, examining his datapad with the enthusiasm of a man inspecting a tax audit. More useless junk to sift through. Useless junk is our specialty, Jax chimed in, his grin as sharp as the knife he was absent-mindedly twirling. Maybe we'll find something that doesn't want to explode. If it's all the same, I'd prefer something that doesn't come with a self-destruct button, Marnix said, eyes still scanning the horizon. Rena, let's take a closer look. The ship groaned in protest as Rena coaxed it towards the new discovery, her hands moving over the controls with the precision of a surgeon who moonlighted as a pickpocket. The wreck loomed ahead, a massive silhouette against the backdrop of space that promised either salvation or the kind of trouble that ends with a bang. Looks ancient, Vex observed, leaning forward as the Indomitable drew closer. Could be pre-war tech, Jack scoffed. Pre-disappointment, more like. Hey, optimism isn't our strong suit, Marnix said, trying to sound hopeful. But this might be the break we need. Or the break that breaks us, Vex added, ever the ray of sunshine. As they approached, the wreckage revealed itself in layers of twisted metal and faded logos, each promising greatness in an era long past. It was a ship from the dawn of space exploration, the kind that had launched 1,000 wannabe space pirates into the void. Docking complete, Rena announced, her voice steady despite the ship's unsettling creaks. Let's see what we've got. The airlock hissed open, and the crew stepped into the wreck like explorers venturing into the belly of a slumbering beast. The corridors were dim, lit by emergency lights that flickered like the universe's idea of a joke. Anyone else feel like we're walking into a horror vid? Vex asked, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. Don't worry, Jack said, weapon at the ready. I'll protect you from the big bad boogeyman. They moved cautiously through the ship, the atmosphere thick with the kind of tension that prefaces a threat. As they entered a larger chamber, a faint glow caught Marnix's attention. "What's that?" he asked, pointing towards the source. "Let's find out," Rena replied, already moving to investigate. The glow came from a console, ancient yet surprisingly intact. Marnix approached it with the reverence of a treasure hunter discovering buried gold. He dusted off the surface and examined the symbols. "Well?" Vex asked, peering over his shoulder. "What's the verdict?" "Hard to say," Marnix admitted. "But it looks like some kind of control interface. Could be a weapon," Jax suggested, eyes gleaming with mischief. "Or a really fancy coffee maker," Vex countered. "Either way, we're bound to wake something up." Marnix tapped a button, and the console hummed to life, lights flickering across its surface like the eyes of a curious cat. The ship shuddered, and the crew exchanged worried glances. "Maybe that wasn't the smartest move," Rena said, her tone dry. The console lit up with a holographic display, images and schematics unfolding like a digital tapestry. Marnix's eyes widened as he realized what they were seeing. "This isn't just a ship," he said, awe creeping into his voice. "It's a repository of technology from before the fall, stuff that's been lost for centuries." "Please tell me it's not a repository of killer robots," Jax said. "I'm not in the mood for a robotic uprising." "No robots," Marnix assured him. "But look at this." He pointed to a section of the schematics, detailing a propulsion system that made their current engine look like a child's toy. "Think we can retrofit this to the Indomitable?" Rena asked, a spark of hope in her eyes. "It's a long shot," Vex replied, studying the display. "But if we can make it work, we'd be able to outrun anything in this sector. Outrun Skrizek and his merry band of lunatics." Jax asked, his grin returning with vigor. "I like the sound of that. Then we've got work to do," Marnix said, determination setting his jaw. "Let's get what we can and haul it back to the ship." They worked with the efficiency of desperate scavengers, stripping the wreck of its valuable parts and technology. Each piece they salvaged added a glimmer of hope to their grim situation, the promise of turning the tables on their pursuers growing with each component. "Feels like we're robbing a grave," Vex commented, hauling a particularly unwieldy piece of machinery. "Better than becoming part of one," Jax replied, his focus on the task at hand. With their newfound bounty, they returned to the Indomitable, the ship's crew immediately setting to work on integrating the ancient technology into their own systems. The process was a chaotic dance of wires, sparks, and muttered curses, but slowly, the pieces began to fall into place. "Think we'll survive this Frankenstein of a ship?" Rena asked, wiping sweat from her brow. "Survive nothing," Marnix said, a rare note of optimism in his voice. "We're going to make history, or a really spectacular explosion," Vex added, ever the cynic. Time blurred into a frenzy of activity, the crew driven by a renewed sense of purpose. The ancient ship's tech was a jigsaw of mysteries, but each solved piece brought them closer to a functioning whole. "Skrizak's gonna hate this," Jax said, his grin a wicked promise of retribution. "Good," Marnix replied, satisfaction lacing his words. "About time we gave him something to worry about." As the last connection was made, the Indomitable hummed with newfound power, the engines pulse a reassuring rhythm of potential. The crew gathered on the bridge, anticipation crackling in the air like static. "Let's see what she can do," Marnix said, his hand hovering over the controls. Rena engaged the systems, the ship responding with a smoothness that belied its ragtag appearance. The view outside shifted as they accelerated, the stars blurring into streaks of light. "Oh, she's a beauty," Jax laughed, watching the speed readouts climb. "Skrizak's not gonna know what hit him, unless he's got a speed gun," Vex quipped, but even he couldn't hide his excitement. "Time to even the odds," Marnix said, a fierce determination in his voice. "Let's give the galaxy something to talk about." With their spirits lifted by their discovery, the crew set a course for the nearest sector where they could put their newfound speed to the test. Each of them knew the risks, but their resolve burned brighter than it had in weeks. As the Indomitable raced through space, powered by the ghosts of the past, Marnix couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. They were still underdogs in a universe that thrived on chaos, but now they had an edge, one that could change the course of their fate. "Here's to sticking it to the universe," Vex said, raising an imaginary glass. "May it choke on us," Jax added, grinning wide. The stars sped by, and while the path ahead was fraught with danger, one thing was clear. The Indomitable was ready for the fight, and so were her crew. They were survivors, fighters, and most importantly, they were human, stubborn as hell and twice as determined to make the universe regret ever betting against them. "Skrizak won't know what hit him," Marnix said, a wicked smile tugging at his lips. "And I can't wait to see his face when he figures it out," Rena replied, her voice a perfect blend of triumph and defiance. With their newfound speed and the promise of victory driving them forward, the Indomitable and her crew were ready to face whatever the galaxy threw their way. They had a plan, they had hope, and most importantly they had each other, a ragtag family bound by adversity and the relentless spirit of humanity. And damn, it felt good to be alive. The Indomitable was a hot mess of wires and worn-out systems, but now it had a new trick up its sleeve. Every member of the crew was buzzing with anticipation, like a bunch of kids who'd found the keys to a candy store. And Skrizak, well, that smug bastard and his coalition of aliens was the candy store they were about to raid. Captain Marnix Harlow tapped a finger against the ship's beaten-up console, a habit that said more about his nerves than any motivational speech could. "All right, folks, let's give our dear friend Skrizak a proper send-off." Vex leaned back in his seat, the datapad casting shadows under his eyes that could rival a raccoon's. "I hope send-off means turning his ship into fireworks. Otherwise, count me out, count you out, Vex." Jax chuckled, his grin as sharp as a new recruit's haircut. "Since when have you ever stepped back from a chance to annoy someone? If I'm going out, it's with a bang." "Not a whimper," Vex retorted, eyes glued to the data scrolling across his screen. "Preferably the kind that takes our enemies with us." Rena, ever the pragmatist, shot a sideways glance at Marnix. "You know, if this ancient tech decides to throw a tantrum, we might end up as Stardust ourselves." Marnix gave her a tight-lipped smile, the kind that tried and failed to hide the gnawing doubt in his gut. "Let's assume it doesn't and put on a good show." Their plan was simple in the way that only a lunatic would call simple. Use the pre-war tech to outmaneuver and outgun Skrizak's superior fleet. Easy, right? Well, easy except for the fact that the Indomitable was held together by little more than hope and duct tape. "All right," Marnix said, shaking off the unease. "Jax, you ready to light it up?" Jax nodded, fingers dancing over the controls like he was playing an old-school video game. "Born ready, Captain. Let's make Skrizak regret ever hearing the name Indomitable." They cut through space like a knife through soft cheese, the ancient propulsion system humming with power. Outside, the derelict ships of the starship graveyard blurred past, mere ghosts of what once was. Entering hostile territory, Rena announced, her voice as calm as a cat in a sunbeam. Skrizak's fleet dead ahead. The crew snapped to attention, eyes fixed on the looming shadows of alien vessels that cluttered the viewscreen. The aliens had ships that looked like they'd been designed by a committee of hyperactive children with a penchant for spikes and unnecessary fins. They were big, they were mean, and they were hunting. "Showtime," Marnix said, a grim smile tugging at his lips. They huddled around the tactical display, much like a group of gamblers about to roll the dice on the bet of a lifetime. The plan was a dance of chaos, a coordinated mess of maneuvers designed to confuse, bewilder, and ultimately humiliate the aliens. "Remember," Marnix said, his voice low and urgent, "Skrizak's coalition relies on their cloaking tech. We need to make them visible, poke the bear until it roars." Vex asked, arching an eyebrow. "More like poke it until the rest of the forest hears it scream," Marnix replied, nodding to Jax. Jax grinned like a kid who just found out Christmas was coming twice this year. With pleasure. With deft fingers, Jax activated the ancient Tekis counter-cloaking system, a relic of a bygone era, now their secret weapon. Beams of light lanced out from the Indomitable, painting the space around them in an eerie glow. The alien ships, once hidden, now flickered into view like a horror show's final act. "Well, would you look at that," Vex said, a wicked gleam in his eye. "Ugly little buggers, aren't they?" "They are about to get a lot uglier," Jax said, fingers poised over the weapon's console. The Indomitable danced through space with the grace of a drunk ballerina, weaving between enemy ships with reckless abandon. The alien coalition, caught off guard, scrambled to respond, their formations breaking like a ceramic plate at a Greek wedding. "Rena, keep us moving," Marnix ordered, watching the chaos unfold with a satisfaction that was almost clinical. "Doing what I can," Rena replied, her hands a blur over the controls. "This thing's fast, but she's temperamental, like Vex on a bad hair day," Jax quipped, his attention never wavering from the battle. "Weapons hot," Vex announced, rolling his shoulders in anticipation. "Then let's give them hell," Marnix said, his voice steady. The familiar thrum of the ship's cannons filled the air, the deck vibrating with each shot. They cut through the enemy ranks, every hit a small victory in the sprawling chaos of space combat. The alien coalition, for all their tech and numbers, hadn't counted on the sheer audacity of the Indomitable's crew. Skrizak's flagship dead ahead, Rena reported, eyes narrowed. "Time to make a statement," Marnix said, nodding to Jax and Vex. They unleashed everything they had, a symphony of destruction that tore through the enemy lines. It was madness, a cacophony of explosions and maneuvers that would have made a sane man weep. "Skrizak's calling for reinforcements," Vex said, glancing at the incoming data. "Let him call," Jax replied, teeth bared in a feral grin. "We'll just send them back in pieces." The Indomitable surged forward, a missile aimed directly at the heart of the enemy fleet. The alien ships, caught in the crossfire, struggled to regroup, their superior technology rendered useless against the humans' unpredictability. As they closed in on Skrizak's flagship, Marnix felt a thrill of exhilaration. This was it, a chance to turn the tables, to show the galaxy that humanity wasn't just a footnote in someone else's story. "Brace yourselves," Rena warned, her hands steady on the controls. The ship shuddered as they broke through the enemy lines, the alien defenses crumbling under the onslaught. Skrizak's flagship loomed before them, a fortress of steel and malice. "Skrizak's not gonna like this," Vex said, his tone almost gleeful. "Good," Marnix replied, his eyes fixed on their target. "Let's make sure he remembers this day." With a final burst of speed, the Indomitable closed the distance, their weapons locking onto the flagship's core. The tension was electric, a heartbeat away from victory or defeat. "Steady," Marnix whispered, the weight of their gamble pressing down on him. The moment stretched out, a fragile line between triumph and disaster. And then, with a roar that shook the stars themselves, they unleashed everything they had. The enemy flagship erupted in a blaze of light, a supernova of fire and fury that consumed everything in its path. The alien coalition, leaderless and disoriented, scattered like leaves in a storm. They'd done it. The Indomitable, against all odds, had turned the tide. The galaxy, for better or worse, would remember this day. "Holy hell," Jax said, his voice awed. "We actually did it." "Never doubted us for a second," Vex replied, though his grin said otherwise. Marnix let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. They'd gambled everything, and somehow, against all reason, they'd won. "Skrizak's gonna need a new flagship," Rena remarked, her lips quirking in a rare smile. "Let's hope he doesn't have one on layaway," Marnix said, the weight of the moment settling over him. They'd made history, but more importantly, they'd shown the galaxy that humanity was a force to be reckoned with, a scrappy, unpredictable force that refused to be written off. "Here's to the Indomitable," Vex said, raising an imaginary glass. "And here's to us," Jax added, his grin as bright as the stars. The crew settled into a comfortable silence, the reality of their victory slowly sinking in. The universe was a cruel and unforgiving place, but for now they'd carved out a small corner of triumph, a testament to human tenacity and sheer bloody-mindedness. Think the galaxy's ready for us? Rena asked, her gaze fixed on the stars ahead. Who cares? Marnix replied, a wicked smile on his face. We'll make them ready. And with that, the Indomitable powered forward, the crew united in defiance and victory, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. After all, they were the underdogs of the galaxy, and they wouldn't have it any other way. The Indomitable limped through the aftermath of the battle like a drunk staggering home after last call, bits of debris clinging to its hull like unwelcome party guests. Inside, the crew basked in the glow of their improbable victory. Well, we didn't die, Jack said, his voice a mix of relief and disbelief. Against all expectations, we've cheated death once more. Death really needs to update its resume, Vex replied, leaning back in his chair like a man who'd just won a lottery he hadn't entered. Seems it's not as inevitable as advertised. Marnix, his hand still drumming nervously against the console, allowed himself a small smile. They'd done it. Somehow they'd managed to survive the galaxy's equivalent of a deathmatch, and they were still in one piece. Mostly, if you squinted. So, what's the plan now, Captain? Rena asked, her voice pragmatic as ever. She was already checking the ship systems, trying to coax them back to life with the kind of determination usually reserved for old cars on cold mornings. We head back to Earth, Marnix replied, the words tasting strange and wonderful on his tongue. Let them know we're not just space debris waiting to happen. Jack snorted. You think they're going to roll out the red carpet for us? More like they'll roll us up in it and toss us in a corner. Probably, Marnix admitted, but we'll be legends if only for a few minutes. And hey, maybe someone will buy us a drink. Yeah, because what we really need is more liquid courage, Vex quipped, casting a sideways glance at the ship's condition. Speaking of which, how's our ride holding up, Rena? Rena tapped a few buttons, her brow furrowing. She's seen better days, but then again, so have we. Point taken, Marnix said, adjusting his seat with a wince. Let's just hope she holds together for the journey home. The navigation system, which had the reliability of a politician's promise, beeped angrily before deciding to give up altogether. It was a testament, not that kind, Vex, not to their victory but to their sheer dumb luck. So what do we do when we get back? Jax asked, his fingers tapping restlessly on the console. Marnix shrugged. I figure we tell our tale to anyone who'll listen, maybe even find a place where we won't be shot at for 5 minutes. Sounds boring, Vex chuckled. But I guess we've earned a bit of boredom. As they drifted away from the battlefield, the alien coalition ships began to pull themselves together, like embarrassed guests at a party that had gotten way out of hand. Skrizak's forces might have been licking their wounds, but they weren't stupid. They knew when they'd been beaten fair and square. Or at least when they'd been beaten by a bunch of maniacs willing to risk everything just to stick it to them. Incoming transmission, Rena announced, her voice tinged with curiosity. Patch it through, Marnix said, though he had a pretty good idea who was calling. The screen flickered to life, revealing the scowling visage of Skrizak himself. Humans, Skrizak began, his voice a mix between a growl and a particularly disgruntled cat. You've proven yourselves resourceful. Was that a compliment? Jax muttered, leaning closer. I think we just made history. Skrizak's eye twitched, a volcanic eruption of frustration barely held in check. Do not mistake this for weakness, but your defiance has been noted. Noted? Vex asked, arching an eyebrow. What are we, a footnote in your history books? More like a cautionary tale, Skrizak replied, his eyes narrowing. But you have earned a modicum of respect. Perhaps this is not the last time we shall meet. Great, Rena said dryly. Something to look forward to. The transmission ended, leaving the crew in a silence that was almost contemplative. Almost. Well, that was awkward, Jax said, breaking the tension. Think he likes us? Like is a strong word, Marnix replied. But at least they're not shooting at us anymore. Yet, Vex added with a smirk. Never underestimate the power of a grudge. As they continued their journey, the starship graveyard loomed in the distance, a testament to battles long past and victories forgotten. It was a reminder of what awaited them if they weren't careful, an eternity of drifting among the stars, a ghost story told in hushed whispers. "Hey, Rena," Vex called, glancing at the scanners. "Any chance we can avoid that lovely patch of space debris?" "Working on it," Rena replied, adjusting their course with the precision of a cat walking along a fence. "But you try steering a ship that could fall apart if you sneeze too hard." "Noted," Vex said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "I'll save the sneezing for later." The journey back to Earth was long and uneventful, filled with the kind of silence that only comes after surviving something truly ridiculous. The crew settled into a routine of maintenance checks, sarcastic banter, and the occasional existential crisis. "So, Captain," Jack said one day, his voice echoing through the cramped corridors, "what do you think they'll say when we get back?" "Probably something along the lines of 'What the hell were you thinking?'" Marnix replied, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "But who cares? We did it. We showed them all." "And lived to tell the tale," Vex added, his voice carrying a hint of disbelief. As Earth finally came into view, a blue and green marble floating in the vastness of space, the Indomitable creaked and groaned in protest. "Almost home," Rena murmured, her eyes fixed on the planet. "Hard to believe we made it." "Believe it," Marnix said, his voice firm. "We may not have the best ship or the best tech, but we have something no one else does." "What's that?" Jax asked, genuinely curious. "A complete lack of self-preservation," Vex answered, earning a chuckle from the crew. "That and each other," Marnix added, his tone warm. "We faced the galaxy and came out swinging. No one can take that away from us." As they descended towards Earth, their victory fresh in their minds, the crew found themselves contemplating the future, a future that for the first time seemed just a little bit brighter. "What do you think's next for us?" Rena asked, breaking the silence. Marnix took a moment to consider. "Who knows? Maybe we'll retire to a nice, quiet asteroid somewhere, or maybe we'll find ourselves another insane adventure." "Whatever it is," Jack said, "I'm in." "Same here," Vex added. "As long as it doesn't involve more alien deathmatches." "Agreed," Rena said, nodding. "But whatever happens, we've proven something important." "Yeah," Marnix said, his voice filled with pride. "No matter what the universe throws at us, we'll face it together." As they touched down on Earth, the crew of the Indomitable stepped out onto solid ground, their hearts lighter than they'd been in a long time. They'd faced the impossible and laughed in its face, leaving a legacy of defiance and hope in their wake. And so, with the galaxy watching and a future wide open to possibilities, the Indomitable and her crew prepared to write the next chapter of their story. A story of survival, resilience, and the indomitable spirit of humanity.